Alejandro, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words of introduction and for the surprise, which is to have President Clinton on tape here today. I have been to Arkansas many times, thanks to President Clinton. When I was mayor of San Antonio, he was governor of the state, and he and Hillary asked me to come here to work on some health issues. They were already thinking about health care reform, which has finally happened in our country, and asked me to go on a tour with them of Arkansas communities back then. And then you can imagine, when I was HUD secretary, I paid special attention to Arkansas. So I was here many times. Then later, I had the opportunity to be the president of Univision, the Spanish language broadcaster that is now, in some markets, the largest television broadcaster in those markets, and even some nights in the entire United States. And that brought me to Arkansas because companies like Walmart really relate to the American Hispanic community through Univision. And then last year I had the opportunity to come and visit here at the Jones Center and meet Margarita and the team, and she invited me to come back, and I'm very, very honored to be able to come back. Mr. Clifford, congratulations on this center. I dare say I have been to many cities in America. As Secretary of HUD, I visited 200 different American cities as part of my job in every single one of the 50 states, and this is as nice a community center as any I have seen anywhere in America. Well done, and put to good use. Superintendent Rawlings and Chief O'Reilly and O'Kelly, Señor Consul, Preciado, Dr. West from the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, all of the other speakers and presenters here today, thank you also for your presentations and contributions and efforts. I am just off the road. 36 hours ago, I was in Manila in the Philippines, working on Habitat for Humanity that's going to build about 20,000 homes in the Philippines this year. I'm a vice chairman of the Habitat International Board, but I flew all through the night of what was actually Thursday night in Manila to get as far as San Francisco last night, to board a plane that got me into Dallas at 5:30 this morning, to board a plane that got me in here about 10 o'clock this morning in order to be here. But when Margarita Solorzano says you have to be here, that's what you do. That's what you do. I'm well prepared for this. My mother, my wife, my two daughters, and 3 granddaughters. So when the women in my life say, this is what you have to do, you do. So I've learned my lessons over the years, and Margarita, I'm glad to be here, along with many others, to participate in supporting this organizational effort. Congratulations to you and to the Hispanic women of Arkansas on an outstanding record of work. Felicidades y adelante. This conference is important to Latinos of Northwest Arkansas. It's important to all the people of this region, but it is equally important as an example to the future of our country. The subjects that you cover here today, the actions that you inspire from the meetings that are occurring here, set an example for communities that are changing across America. Much of the world confronts a moment of demographic change. I mentioned that I was just in Manila, in the Philippines, and there we were working not just on homes in the Philippines, but bringing people together from across the region, from Cambodia and Vietnam and Indonesia and Malaysia, from China, and yes, from Japan. And one of the things that I had noted about Japan over the years working on Japan is the extent to which they are changing demographically. Japan is actually losing 1 million people a year in their population. And what population they have is getting quite a bit older. A very rapidly aging society. This is true in many places across the world. It's true in Spain, it's true in Portugal, it's true in Germany, it's true in the northern countries of Europe, it's true in China, it's true in Russia. Russia is going to be declining in population. China, because of their one-child policy, is declining in population. The situation is so serious in Japan, I learned on this trip, that the present prime minister has to put in place special economic policies because a large industrial country has never declined in population. That means smaller markets. That means smaller economies. They're actually calculating how their GDP will decline. This is a very serious set of issues that confront these nations because it will impact their economic markets, it will impact their anything that requires manpower, human capital, military, social finance, health systems. It's a big crisis. Well, the United States, we have our issues that we must confront, but losing population is not one of them. We are going to grow in large measure because no matter what happens in the traditional demography of change, we're an immigrant country. And we're going to continue to grow because we welcome people from other parts of the world here, and they bring their lifestyle and their confidence and their ambitions, and they grow their families, and the American way of life is going to continue in a way that we're not going to see in other parts of the world. This is really quite an amazing thing. The United States today is 300 million people in the census of 2000. And the United States in 2040 will be a country of about 410 million people. We're going to grow by 110 million people. I mean, that is a good thing. Our markets are going to grow. Our capacity is going to grow. And let me just say to you, the fastest growing segment that will contribute to that American strength is the American Latino community, which today is over 50 million people. And in the same time frame that I'm describing will be 100 million Americans, about a quarter of the population of the United States. And by the way, what's happening in Arkansas is a microcosm of that. From 1990 to 2000, number one in percentage increase of the Hispanic population was Arkansas. And that trajectory of growth continues. So it's not an exaggeration to say that one of the saving graces of the American way of life, our economic capacity, our sheer strength in population, which translates into military strength, security, our capacity to be a world force technologically, turns on this question of our immigrants. The difference between our growth and Japan's population decline is that they're a society that has never welcomed immigrants. To be an immigrant in Japan is to be a second-class citizen, for sure. Koreans know that. People from the Chinese know that. But the United States has always been a welcoming place, and we must continue to be going forward. It is not an exaggeration to say that the future of our nation turns on our ability to integrate the new immigrants that have come to America. Just as in the past we integrated Irish and English and Germans and Italians and so many other groups that have come to America's shores, today our immigrants are different. Today we have a large number of Hispanics. We have people who have come from Asia, from the Caribbean. But it falls on it determines America's future to determine how we're going to proceed on this road of integration. Integration into the mainstream of American life. Integration into our school systems. Integration into our economic system. Integration into our science and technology capabilities. Now, that's a hard thing to imagine. I am an optimistic person. I get up every morning, and the world looks fresh, and we attack it with full vim and vigor. But I must say there are moments when people ask me the question, can we do this? That I have to be sober about it. And I ask myself, I don't know whether we can do this. Some would say the nickel is in the air. Another phrase that people use is, the jury's still out. But I tell you, I think that is one of the critical responsibilities of our country going forward to get a handle on this. And what you're doing here in Northwest Arkansas, and I say this without any exaggeration or without any sense of false compliment, can be a model for the country. When I come here and I see the way immigrants have found a way of life and rooted themselves and contributed to the growing businesses of this area, when I see how the receiving community has accepted them, including in a place like this here at the Jones Center and in your schools, when I see companies prospering on the national platform, companies like Walmart and J.B. Hunt and others, utilizing that immigrant talent right here, then I know you're doing something very special. Now, I personally believe this is one of the really important questions before our country. Whether or not we're able to deal with the one major piece of demographic change, which is the aging of our traditional population. Today, we have 40 million Americans over 65 years of age. By 2030, we're going to have 80 million Americans over 65 years of age. That's double the number of people over 65. Today, we have 6 million people over 85 years of age. In the same time frame, that number will triple. We're going to have 20 million people over 85 years of age. Our traditional population is aging. If we didn't have immigrants, America would have the same demographics of aging and declining population as these other countries that I've mentioned. The difference here is we have this youthful energy. We have these new people coming, and they come full of ambition, and they come full of hope. And these are families, when you look in their eyes, you see these are people who want the best for their children. They're willing to work. These are people who understand the equation that says, work hard today, maybe not for myself, but for my kids. And I know they can have a better life, and I want them to get an education. That's the American way. That's the American dream, and it's playing out one more time in these people who may have strange last names like Hernandez, Gonzalez, Gomez, Garcia, maybe names we can't even pronounce. Maybe a different complexion like mine that's a little darker than most. And church and neighborhood habits that people look at and say, well, that's different from what I'm accustomed to. But they're bringing the raw energies that are going to shape the future of the country. Our task together, both the immigrants and the community, is to figure how do we do this integration? What is integration? And I'd like to make the case to you today that this is a responsibility that we have to undertake together. As I say, I've studied this, and so I want to share with you what I think are kind of 5 basic areas of where we need to focus. And I'll be very brief in trying to go through them, but it has to do with language and civic values. It has to do with education. It has to do with the economics and financial aspect of life. It has to do with health and family well-being. And then finally, with community and a sense of belonging and obligation. Let me just briefly kind of walk through what I think are the highlights of each of those. First, with respect to civic values, I think we need to make a commitment together, immigrants and the community at large, that immigrants must add English to their native language. English is the de facto language of our country. If one is going to succeed in this country, one has to understand the language in which businesses are transacted. That doesn't mean give up one's native language or heritage at all. God gave us brains that we can add something without having to take something out. We can add English without having to lose anything of our native heritage, respect for our countries, our culture, or anything else. English is hard to learn. So it means we're going to have to go through some special efforts at the community level to provide the English classes, many of which are oversubscribed in communities across our country. So that's number one in this agenda of civic values. Related to that is learning things about America and how America works. This is a country of laws. Some of the countries from which our immigrants come are not as adherent to laws. They're more class-oriented, more governed by class structures and wealthy families and oligarchs, and that's not the way it works here. So learning how this country actually works is part of our civic values. Second area is education. It is critically important if we're going to integrate immigrants, if they're going to take their place and make the kind of contribution that we need in order to be strong in the world, to sustain our way of life, then we must inculcate an ethic of education at the family level. And Latinos have that, but we can shore it up. We can assure that every family understands our job is to persuade our children that they have to excel in school and do what it takes to help as parents. Turn off the television set, help with the homework, meet the school teachers, go for the report card reports to get a reading on how children are doing, and drive home education, education, education. And related to that is setting the expectation of college or advanced education as a family objective. Because not only do we need to stop the dropout rate, but we need to go beyond 12 years because that's what the economy is going to require going forward. If Latinos are going to be 100 million strong in our society, and if those 100 million are going to be the backbone of how we're going to build our future, then education is one of those. Failure is not an option. Failure is not an option, or we defeat the whole purpose of immigrants coming to this country, and because they're not going to be able to sustain a world of science and technology and computer literacy and financial complexity and all of those things that are part of the American future. The third area I mentioned is economics. So we need to improve people's skills so they can make a living, so they can make a decent living, so people don't live in poverty. Poverty is degrading. Poverty is devastating. And we have to provide people the capability to make a decent living. And added to that, to be able to set some goals for the future. Not just an income today, but savings. Savings for retirement. Savings for college. Savings for buying a home. Savings for generating some net worth. Savings for having a wealth to be able to pass on in the form of a small business. That's the way we do things in America. Latinos, let me tell you, are hard workers. They're hard workers. They understand this dynamic if given the opportunity. The next category I mentioned was health and family well-being. We need to help people understand nutrition and health. I think we've taken a great step as a country in providing access to health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. It's controversial, but poor people will benefit. Latinos happen to be the most underinsured population in the country. They will benefit from this. So let's extend the information that it takes to get into the healthcare system and help with nutrition, because at least in my town, San Antonio, we have an epidemic of diabetes and obesity coming from poor handling of fast foods and poor diet. The indigenous DNA, if you will, is not a good fit with sweet fast foods, and we have this horrendous epidemic of young people who look like who are 30 years old who look like 60 because of the damage that they do to their bodies with bad diets. There's a lot to learn there. All Americans could learn from this, but I know that our Latino community needs some special help. And we work together to shore up our families and keep our families strong. The final area that I'd mention is community involvement and a sense of obligations. That means involvement in church, involvement in neighborhood, involvement in community, all of the things that reach out beyond ourselves. and touch other lives. And in the final analysis, what we want is to create a community that gets it, that gets the idea that they're here and have an obligation to the future of this country. In effect, that says, I will carry my home country in my heart. I'll never forget my parents. I'll never forget my heritage. I'll never forget my language. I'll never forget my faith. But I commit to the obligations that I take on by living in this country, the responsibilities that I have to its future. So it's a balancing of receiving and giving, of rights, but also responsibilities. If we do these things, then I am confident that Latinos will take our place in the mainstream of American life and fit right in the way every generation of immigrants has done before and keep this country strong with that new blood, with that new energy, with that youthful vigor, with an ambitious view of the future. If we do these things, then the receiving communities like Springdale and Bentonville and North Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas will be the better for it. And so will a lot of other places in America where this dynamic is unfolding. Not just in Texas and Florida and California, but in Washington State and North Carolina and Georgia and Virginia and Michigan and a lot of other places. This is a national phenomenon that is occurring. They'll be better for it. And if we do these things, then I am confident America's best days are yet ahead. There's a lot of people who've given up on our country. A lot of Americans who've given up on our country. They just remember better days sometime in the past. They don't understand the change that's occurring. They're getting older themselves. They're part of that aging demographic. With it comes less energy, less confidence about the future. And they believe maybe the best times for America was, 1950, 1955. We just won World War II. We were the colossus of the globe. That was the best time ever for America. But in 1955, Rosa Parks was made to go to the back of the bus and unleash the civil rights movement. And Latino workers were working in the fields with short hoes. So their backs were bent and they were aging, picking the crops. And women had glass ceilings where they could not advance to the corporate or governmental positions of the society. No, I don't think 1955 was our best moment. Our best moment is when we unleash all of our human talent and say to people, your future is unlimited. You can be anything you're willing to work for. If you sacrifice and commit and do your part to make this country stronger. And that's what our society will be when we unleash this human potential. As I said at the outset, I'm just back from Asia, and it's always an interesting thing to see, another part of the world and see where we are in comparison. This was particularly poignant for me because my dad, who obviously is Mexican, grew up in New Mexico and then moved with his family to pick beets in Colorado, laboring family living in Brighton, Colorado. Was drafted, served in World War II. 4 years in the Pacific. So I was in a region in the Philippines where my dad was part of the army that came up from New Guinea and fought for 4 years in the jungle so that our country would emerge as strongly as it did. He went to San Antonio, met my mom. The rest is family history. But he earned for his family a place in the American story. And he was proud of our heritage. And I remember he used to say to me, mijo, which means my son. He used to say, mijo, I'm very confident about the future of our people because we're hard workers and we're hungry and we're going to make this country better. And I've seen that story unfold from our personal neighborhood in West Side San Antonio, everywhere I've been in America. I'm very, very proud of this Latino community in our country, and I'm very, very proud of what it is accomplishing here with the help of the larger community in Northwest Arkansas. It's a story of hope. It's a story of ambitions. It's a story of optimism, which is the American way. So let me close my remarks to you with a favorite expression of optimism, which is the words of Senator Robert Kennedy. I found them in a book that he wrote called To Seek a Newer World, and they were so meaningful to me 35 years ago that I framed them and I keep them in my office, and I've had them on my desk at every job that I've been, because they capture to me two ideas. One is optimism, but it's not an empty optimism. It's an optimism that is real because it commits us to make it so. It commits us to do the work. This is what Bobby Kennedy said. He said, our future may lie beyond our vision, but it is not entirely beyond our control. It is the shaping impulse of America that it is not fate, nor chance, nor the irreversible tides of history that determine our destinies. Rather, he said, it is reason and principle and the work of our own hands. He went on to say there is pride in that, even arrogance, but there's also truth and experience. And in any event, it is the only way we can live. That's what he said. It is not fate. It is not chance, a random toss of the dice. It's not a history that it's already been written. It's not. We don't believe that. We believe it is reason, what we know, what we study, what we analyze, principle, what we believe, our principles, our character, our ideals, and it is, importantly, the work of our own hands. That's a fundamental American idea. I'm proud to tell you, I think it's fundamentally deep in the DNA of America's Latino population as well. If we can get over some of the differences that divide us, if we can understand how one ambitious population with support can help the American dream continue to be as strong and vital as it has ever been, then I think we're on to something. And America's best days indeed are still ahead. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Adelante. Thank you.